The year is 1950. The world stands at a crossroads, a moment in history where the decisions made could alter the course of humanity forever. The world, still reeling from the devastation of World War II, finds itself teetering on the precipice of another global conflict. The scars of the previous war are still fresh, with cities in ruins and society struggling to rebuild. The memories of the horrors witnessed are vivid, and the fear of history repeating itself is palpable. This time, however, the stakes are even higher, the potential consequences even more terrifying. The advent of nuclear weapons has introduced a new level of destruction, one that could obliterate entire cities in the blink of an eye. The Cold War has created an atmosphere of suspicion and hostility, with superpowers amassing arsenals capable of ending civilization as we know it. The specter of nuclear annihilation hangs heavy in the air, a chilling reminder of the destructive power now at humanity's disposal. The world lives under the constant threat of a nuclear holocaust, a fear that permeates every aspect of life, from politics to daily routines. In this powder keg of a world, a small peninsula in East Asia becomes the focal point of a struggle that could have easily spiraled into a Third World War. Korea, divided at the 38th parallel, is a land of stark contrast, with the communist North and the democratic South representing the broader ideological battle between East and West. The Korean War, often referred to as the Forgotten War, was anything but forgettable. It was a brutal and bloody conflict that saw millions of lives lost and countless others forever changed. The war's impact was felt not just on the battlefield, but in the homes and hearts of people around the world. It was a brutal conflict that drew the lines in the sand between the communist North, backed by China and the Soviet Union, and the democratic South, supported by the United States and its allies. The war was a microcosm of the larger Cold War struggle, with each side seeking to prove the superiority of its ideology. The Korean War was not just a regional conflict, it was a proxy war between the two superpowers, a battleground where the ideologies of communism and democracy clashed head-on. The involvement of the United Nations added another layer of complexity, as nations from around the world sent troops to support the South Korean cause. It was a war that tested the resolve of the newly formed United Nations and pushed the world to the brink of nuclear war. The decisions made in the halls of power had the potential to trigger a global catastrophe, and the stakes could not have been higher. In the midst of this maelstrom, a seemingly insignificant battle took place in a remote valley in central Korea. This battle, though small in scale compared to the larger conflict, would have far-reaching implications for the course of the war and the future of the Korean peninsula. The Battle of Kapyong, fought over 3 bloody days and nights in April 1951, would prove to be a pivotal moment in the Korean War, a testament to the courage and sacrifice of the soldiers who fought there, and a stark reminder of the fragility of peace in a world on the edge. The bravery displayed by the troops, many of whom were from countries far from Korea, underscored the global nature of the conflict and the shared desire for peace and stability. The legacy of the Korean War is one of both tragedy and heroism. The soldiers who fought and died in the conflict are remembered for their valor and dedication. Their sacrifices serve as a poignant reminder of the cost of war and the enduring quest for peace. Today, the Korean peninsula remains divided, a lasting symbol of the Cold War's impact. The Demilitarized Zone, or DMZ, stands as a stark reminder of the conflict that once raged there. Families separated by the war still seek reunification, and the echoes of the past continue to influence the present. As we reflect on the Korean War and its place in history, we are reminded of the importance of diplomacy and dialogue in preventing future conflicts. The lessons learned from this war underscore the need for cooperation and understanding among nations, as we strive to build a more peaceful and just world. The Korean War may be referred to as the Forgotten War, but its lessons and legacy are far from forgotten. The courage and sacrifice of those who fought will always be remembered, and their stories will continue to inspire future generations to work towards a world where such conflicts are a thing of the past. To truly understand the significance of the Battle of Kapyong, it is essential to first grasp the context in which it occurred. This battle was not an isolated event, but a crucial moment in a larger, complex conflict that had its roots in the geopolitical shifts following World War II. The seeds of the Korean War were sown in the aftermath of World War II, a period marked by the realignment of global powers and the onset of the Cold War. The Korean peninsula, which had been under Japanese rule for decades, found itself at the center of this new global tension. As the Allies emerged victorious, the Korean peninsula was divided along the 38th parallel. This division was meant to be temporary, but it quickly became a permanent fixture, symbolizing the ideological divide between the communist and capitalist worlds. The Soviet Union took control of the north, installing a communist regime led by the ruthless Kim Il-sung. Kim Il-sung's government was characterized by its strict adherence to communist principles and its aggressive stance towards the south. Meanwhile, the United States supported the establishment of a democratic government in the south under Syngman Rhee. Rhee's government, though democratic in name, was also marked by authoritarian tendencies and a strong anti-communist stance. The division of Korea was always a precarious arrangement, a powder keg waiting to explode. The border between North and South Korea became one of the most heavily militarized zones in the world, with both sides preparing for the possibility of conflict. Both sides harbored aspirations of unifying the peninsula under their respective ideologies. The North sought to spread communism throughout the peninsula, while the South aimed to establish a unified democratic state. Tensions ran high along the border, with frequent skirmishes and provocations. The Demilitarized Zone, or DMZ, was a constant flashpoint, with both sides maintaining a vigilant and often aggressive stance. On June 25, 1950, the fragile peace was shattered. North Korean forces, armed with Soviet tanks and artillery, launched a surprise invasion of the South. This marked the beginning of the Korean War, a conflict that would draw in nations from around the world. The invasion took the United States and its allies by surprise. Despite their preparations, the sheer scale and speed of the North Korean advance caught them off guard. The North Koreans, battle-hardened and well-equipped, made rapid advances south, quickly overrunning much of South Korea. Cities fell one after another, and the South Korean forces, along with their American allies, found themselves in a desperate fight for survival. The United Nations, with the United States at the forefront, responded swiftly. Recognizing the threat posed by the North Korean invasion, they deployed troops to aid the beleaguered South Korean forces. This international response marked the beginning of a protracted and brutal conflict that would see many battles, including the pivotal Battle of Kapyong. The intervention of United Nations forces, spearheaded by the United States, initially stemmed the tide of the North Korean advance. The UN forces, bolstered by air power and superior logistics, pushed the North Koreans back, eventually crossing the 38th parallel and advancing deep into North Korea. The tide of the war seemed to be turning in favor of the South. However, a new and formidable player was about to enter the fray, dramatically altering the course of the conflict. In late 1950, hundreds of thousands of Chinese troops, under the banner of the People's Volunteer Army, crossed the Yalu River into North Korea, launching a massive counteroffensive that caught the UN forces off guard. The Chinese intervention transformed the Korean War from a regional conflict into a major international crisis, bringing the world closer to the brink of a wider war. The Chinese offensive was swift and brutal. They employed human wave attacks, overwhelming the UN positions with sheer numbers. The Chinese counteroffensive in the winter of 1950 sent shockwaves through the UN forces. The sudden and fierce assault caught many by surprise, leading to a rapid and chaotic series of events that would shape the course of the Korean War. Outnumbered and outmaneuvered, the UN troops were forced to retreat south in disarray. The retreat was marked by confusion and desperation, as soldiers scrambled to regroup and establish new defensive positions. The harsh winter conditions only added to the misery, with freezing temperatures and snow-covered landscapes making the retreat even more arduous. The situation was dire, and the fate of South Korea hung precariously in the balance. Civilians were caught in the crossfire, their homes and livelihoods destroyed by the relentless advance of the Chinese forces. The once peaceful countryside was now a war-torn landscape, filled with the echoes of gunfire and the cries of the displaced. In their desperate attempt to halt the Chinese advance, the UN forces established a defensive perimeter north of Seoul, the South Korean capital. Soldiers worked tirelessly, digging trenches and fortifying their positions, knowing that the fate of the entire nation rested on their shoulders. The defensive line was a last-ditch effort to prevent the fall of Seoul and to buy time for reinforcements to arrive. One of the most critical points along this line was a valley known as Kapyong, located approximately 70 miles northeast of Seoul. The valley's strategic importance was immediately recognized by both sides, as it served as a natural corridor through which the Chinese forces could advance towards the capital. Kapyong was not just a geographical location, it was a strategic crossroads, a gateway to Seoul and the heartland of South Korea. The valley's unique topography made it a natural choke point, and whoever controlled Kapyong would have a significant advantage in the ongoing conflict. The stakes were incredibly high, and both sides were acutely aware of the valley's importance. If the Chinese forces could break through at Kapyong, the road to Seoul would be wide open, and the consequences for South Korea would be catastrophic. The fall of Seoul would not only be a significant psychological blow, but also a strategic disaster, potentially leading to the collapse of the entire UN defense line in the region. Tasked with holding this vital position was a multinational force composed mainly of soldiers from the 27th Commonwealth Brigade, consisting of Australian, Canadian and New Zealand units, along with elements of the 1st Battalion, Gloucestershire Regiment of the British Army. These troops were seasoned and battle-hardened, having already faced numerous challenges in the harsh conditions of the Korean peninsula. These men, hailing from different corners of the globe, found themselves united in their common purpose, to hold the line against the advancing Chinese. Despite their diverse backgrounds and nationalities, they shared a bond forged in the crucible of war. Their camaraderie and determination would be put to the ultimate test in the coming days, as they prepared to defend Kapyong with everything they had. As the soldiers prepared for the impending battle, they took moments to write letters home, reflecting on their experiences and the uncertainty of the future. These quiet moments of introspection were a stark contrast to the chaos and violence that awaited them. Each soldier knew that the coming battle could be their last, but they were resolute in their mission to protect South Korea and their fellow comrades. The preparations for the Battle of Kapyong were meticulous and thorough. Artillery was positioned, defenses were strengthened, and every possible measure was taken to ensure that the UN forces could hold their ground. The tension was palpable, as both sides knew that the outcome of this battle could change the course of the war. On the night before the battle, the soldiers huddled in their trenches, the cold night air filled with a sense of anticipation and dread. They knew that the dawn would bring with it a fierce and relentless assault, and they steeled themselves for the fight of their lives. The Battle of Kapyong was about to begin, and the fate of South Korea hung in the balance.